Hello everyone, and this is my review for TNA Impact Wrestling's Bound for Glory pay-per-view for 2013. And just to go off and say right from the get-go, in general, the entire pay-per-view sucked. It was really, really bad. Outside of the... And it wasn't necessarily all the matches were really bad, though a lot of them really were. It was also just the intent, the actual either lack of a build, or lack or very little build towards a match, or no build at all towards a match, or even in a sense of how they were building the storyline and not really making sense to why they were building it the way they were building it to begin with. The X Division title match, the Ultimate X match, was just it was bad. The whole aspect behind the Ultimate X match is to get rid of the ladders and you do more exciting things with the cables, but yet they, you put Jeff Hardy in the match and he has to have ladders all over the place, so you have it pretty much turn into nothing more than a ladder match than an Ultimate X match, with probably one of the worst finishes I've seen towards it as well, with how they had Chris Sabin win the title back. It was just, that in general was just overall bad. The tag team title match with Robbie E and Jesse, and they had the Mr. Olympiad there as well now as part of their corner against Gunner and James Storm. That was actually a good match. Too bad they didn't really have any kind of build behind it outside of the pre-show match that they had for the gauntlet to try to get them into to see who would face them at the pay-per-view. There was really no build on any of the impacts leading into the pay-per-view about that gauntlet. And them interacting with James Storm or Gunner in any way, shape, or form. The match was just kind of there. You had them interacting with the other teams, but you had no interaction to make that match in any way, shape, or form to be important. Same with the Knockouts title match. They didn't really have that much of a build. You didn't have all three of them interacting with each other on any of the impacts going into the pay-per-view. Gail Kim had barely any TV time outside of one little altercation with Brooke Tessmacher, and I think a mixed tag match with ODB at some point. And then, of course, Brooke Tessmacher got into the match with the #1 contendership match, but didn't interact at all really with ODB as well going into there. Again, the match was actually a good match, but there wasn't much build, or if any build at all, to get people behind that match in general. So, I think you're kind of getting where I'm going with this. A lot of these matches, the ones that I felt that were actually good on the show, had no real interest behind them in any way, shape, or form. They didn't really have a good build behind them to get people interested into it. Another thing that I ended up not really liking is the fact that they're going ahead and using Kurt Angle's induction as a storyline now, saying he's not, having him say he doesn't deserve the induction, and when he feels like he's worthy, he'll then accept the Hall of Fame induction at that point. It might be an interesting storyline, but I don't feel like they really need to be using that as part of a storyline. The whole Hall of Fame deal, even though in most cases with wrestling it's kind of just like placed into the company's like little booklets or something in that sense, it does mean, it should at least mean something, and it shouldn't really be used in storylines outside of maybe someone trying to go after the Hall of Famer, saying they don't deserve it for such and such reasons at that point. But having them say they don't deserve it, I really don't see the point of them actually using it in that way, shape, or form. Now Kurt Angle's match with Bobby Roode was by far the best match of the night. And again, this falls under the aspect of great match, not much time for a build. They basically used the last 2 weeks of Impact to build this match, and you got a little bit of something interesting out of it, but not enough to make you fully engaged in the match. You got a great, probably about 25-30 minute match. It was a great match to watch, but not really much interest on that storyline build. And it just, in that sense, it makes the match suffer a little bit, but overall the performance of the match was just a great performance. The Ethan Carter III thing And, you know, they have them decide the debut on the Bound for Glory pay-per-view. It's supposed to be their biggest show of the year. And instead of, you know, trying to give him something good to work with on what would be one of your best shows, you give him a squash match. At this point, why are you having him debut on the pay-per-view and giving him a squash match? Just have him debut on Impact. Or if you're going to have him debut and not have him, don't have him in a match. Have him do a promo and have an interaction with something to try to lead a storyline going, instead of just giving them some stupid squash match on the pay-per-view itself. This leads into basically the last two matches. They kind of intertwine with how I felt about the matches themselves. First, the Sting and Magnus match, and of course the Bully Ray and AJ Styles match as well. Both these matches, I felt, were just mistimed, mispaced, completely slow, taking almost forever to get to their next spot. Like nothing in between to lead them into that spot. It's like just, we do one spot, now we're going to wait a minute to do the next type deal. It just, both those matches in general, and of course it being the second to last match and the last match of the show, just, you would have expected a better pacing from them in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I wasn't expecting an overall great match out of the Sting and Magnus match, but I was expecting at least a pretty good one. And you didn't really get a good match out of it either. You might have gotten something that was at least okay. And the only really good thing you can get out of it is the storyline bit of having, like, you know, Magnus not really showing that much respect to Sting after he wins the match, kind of just brushing him off at the end of the match. That might lead into something at least interesting in a storyline wise, and we'll see where they actually go with that. So maybe you can get at least one good thing out of the pay-per-view in general, at least storyline wise. And now with the main event, like the entire build that I've seen for the main event with AJ Styles and Bully Ray was bad to begin with. First of all, it made no sense to have Dixie Carter actually start siding with the Aces and Eights on the, because the entire time the Aces and Eights have been there, they've been trying to destroy TNA, take it over, and yet you have the president of the company siding with them in this case because they're deciding to go with AJ Styles not being necessarily the savior of TNA, but basically going into this main event to win the title and get some payback on Dixie in this case. So a lot of the storyline focus was around Dixie Carter and AJ Styles when it should have been more around AJ Styles and Bully Ray, or just in the sense coming up with a better way of ending the Aces and Eights. They did such a good job starting the Aces and Eights in general, and the storyline worked really well all the way through Slammiversary and somewhat past that as well, but towards the end it just completely died. Basically them like kicking off members one by one, getting rid of Devon, getting rid of Luke Doc, and eventually Mr. Anderson and Wes Briscoe, and getting rid of all of them one by one, as I guess in some cases a lot of them had left the company. It would have been good if they came up with like a fitting finish to that storyline. Tonight would have been a good way to have a fitting finish to the Aces and Eights. Have a one-off with like Mr. Anderson, Doc, and Wes Briscoe coming back out there and making it, because they built it at the like a little bit into the shows, like maybe a reformation of the Aces and Eights, or the resurrection of it in some way. So you're maybe thinking it's like, oh, some of the members are coming back or something in that sense. It would have been nice to see the members then come out and decide to actually turn on Bully at the end of the match, or just turn their back on him, giving it like at least a fitting finish to the Aces and Eights. But you really didn't get any of that. You just got Garrett Bischoff and Knox coming out there to actually try to help Bully and, you know, just fail at that point. So just overall, I felt the Bound for Glory pay-per-view was just, it was bad mainly because of a lack of a good build going into the pay-per-view itself. That was the main focal point. They failed at building this pay-per-view in a good way, in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, that's my review for TNA Impact Wrestling's Bound for Glory pay-per-view. I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.